I'd written one of the stories, which is called A Journey, when I was 24, so that was always there. I always knew I had one story. The second story came when there's been a very big debate in Ireland in recent years about child sex abuse, especially by priests. And I looked at how that worked on TV with priests coming on TV or coming out of courtrooms or being sentenced to terms in prison. And it struck me, I wonder what it would be like in a small town in Ireland for the mother of somebody like that. How would she live? What would happen to her? What would the drama of that be? Because as a writer, what you're looking for more than anything else is drama. I then imagined a woman about 80. And if you think of an Irish mother, you might think of somebody who spends a lot of time in the church, who's religious, who's devoted to her children, is very conservative. But actually, Ireland's changed a lot, and a lot of women of that age are now very independent-minded people, and they drive their own cars and they go on holidays. And I thought, oh, what if it was a very modern 80-year-old woman who had a son like that? So then I had two, and they just slowly grew. Another story occurred to me, and then another. And then I realized, oh, wow, I could actually put an overall title on this book called Mothers and Sons, rather than calling it, where the longest story is called A Long Winter, for example, rather than calling it A Long Winter and Other Stories. I could actually have a generic title which would cover all the stories, because all the stories, in one way or another, dealt with the relationship between mothers and sons. Sometimes the tiniest thing is enough to start a story. Someone tells you something. I have a house in Spain in the Pyrenees, and we bought a garden from a man, and somebody told me that there was a ruined house in the garden, that his mother had been born in that house, and that she had died, in fact, because she had left her own village that she married into and walked back to the village she was from, and done this on a winter's day, and the snow came very suddenly, and that she was covered in the snow, and they couldn't find her. And that was enough for me. Sometimes what Henry James always said was, it's much better to get half a story from somebody so you can sort of fill in the details yourself. The stories are not in any way autobiographical, in the sense that, for example, two of the mothers are alcoholic, and my own mother certainly was not alcoholic. Two of the mothers are singers, and my mother was not a singer. So they're not in any way autobiographical. But of course, you use details. You use things you know, houses you know, buildings you know, atmospheres you know. But sometimes they're just dependent on somebody telling you or you overhearing half a story. The story Long Winter took me the longest to do. It's the story set in the Pyrenees, where a woman leaves the house that she married into and walks back to the house she's from, and a big snowstorm comes. The place becomes a most inhospitable place, and her son goes in search of her. I realized when I had this story that I should be very careful with it. For me, anyway, that was as clear in its line as that I had a drama as clear as that. So what I did was, I went to the Pyrenees at that time of the year. I walked every day or every other day along the very road the son walked on looking for his mother, in the weather the son was walking along. So I found the weather. For example, in the story, the barn door bangs at night and he has to get up because the door is open and it's keeping him awake. He has to get up and put a stone against it to keep it, tightly closed. And that happened. I mean, in other words, I, one night, had to get up and do that. And the next morning I got up and I wrote the account of the boy in the story doing that. I went out walking one day and they were shooting wild boar in the forest. And I saw them coming by in a truck with the dead boar in the back of the truck. And that happens in the story. So that the details of weather and some of the details and some of the houses, all that, I actually wrote on the hoof, as it were. I was there that day when that happened. Of course, the outline of the story, the larger story, was something I'd half heard and half imagined. But that was the story, I think, well, obviously it's the longest story. It's 25,000 words. It's about 80 pages that I put, I suppose, most work into. But there's another story called A Song, which is written almost immediately. It's only about 6 pages, and it's the story of a son who meets his mother he hasn't seen for, I think, 19 years, and he meets her in a public house in the west of Ireland. And that was written really almost in one draft, almost in one sitting, and it came to me very easily. So sometimes you obviously grow terribly fond of something that takes no work and you wish all fiction could be as easy as that. I suppose those two stories, one called A Song and the other called A Long Winter, which I like best in this book.